Jerry McHugh Jr. here for this month's Improving Our San Juan IQ presentation. I want to thank you all for taking time to attend today. We know that your time is valuable and appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you. Today we have some independent producers to talk about what's happening in Northwest New Mexico. I'm the moderator and I'm a panelist, and I'm also president and owner of San Juan Resources, a 30-year-old company which operates a small number of wells, 40 wells in the San Juan Basin exclusively. We have interests in 200 other non-op working interests and overrides and assortments in all in the San Juan. In addition, we own 30,000 plus acres of HBP and leasehold in the San Juan Basin, which focuses on the Mancos oil and gas areas, in addition to Dakota and Picture Cliffs. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first panelist with the group. His name is John Thompson. I will put on my Walsh engineering hat because this is an artifact that I got from Walsh. So John, please talk about yourself and Walsh Epic, and it's the floor is yours for a bit.
Good morning, everybody. Jerry, thank you for having me today. Need to make a qualifier. I don't know if you see it looks like I've been punched out. I actually wrecked on my mountain bike this weekend, and the big harm was a concussion. So I'm still a little bit loopy. So I say strange things without being hit in the head. So this could be even more interesting today. But no, Jerry's actually one of our clients. I work for Walsh Engineering. I'm the current president of Walsh Engineering. My brother, the former president, has retired. We have a little history. Walsh Engineering was started by Red Walsh back in the 60s, and kind of a family business. My brother-in-law took it over probably about 25 years ago, and was a real small entity at the time, did contract pumping and engineering work. Through the years, we've grown, and we take care of about 1,400 wells for various clients across the basin. And by take care of, I mean we do the lease operating, we'll do some of the well site supervision. If need be, we'll do the production accounting. So we're kind of a full service upstream oil and gas contractor. One of the other developments of being in that business is we've slowly acquired our own production, and we have a sister company that is called Epic Energy. It's a separate entity, has its own board of directors. The interesting thing is that it has no employees. It contracts 100% with Walsh Engineering to do all of its work. Currently, Epic operates about 420 wells in the San Juan Basin. We make about, on a good day, 8 or 9 million cubic feet of gas a day and about 450 to 500 barrels of oil. So anyway, that's kind of who we are.
Okay, thanks, John. And I'll put on my Dugan. I don't have a Dugan hat. I have a ski hat that's in my ski bag somewhere, but I wanted to, when I first started at Dugan as an employee in the 80s, 70s, 80s, I got this Dugan management company help you understand how to measure the gas out of the wells. And then I got this thing which I refer to even today, the sectionalized township and the NMOCD unit numbers. So without further ado, I'll introduce John Alexander, VP at Dugan Production.
Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate the invitation. That deal that you held up in your hand is probably the only thing we've ever given away in our entire lives. And so that's the situation. Dugan Production was started by Tom Dugan in 1959. So we're working on 61 years. I've told everybody that we'll worry about, when we get past 61, we'll get to, we'll worry about 62 at that time. We're a family-owned, independent, as Tom Dugan used to say, very independent oil and gas company. Tom passed away in a few years back in 2018. And so his son, his grandson, rather, Sean Dugan, is currently president of operation and chief operating officer or chief executive officer for the company. We operate about 1,200 oil and gas wells. We produce probably 21,000 MCFD of gas, and our legacy production is about probably 400 barrels of oil per day. We are partnered with DJR Energy for the development of our Mincus acreage, and they've been a good partner, but they do most of that for us. As it's on our acreage, of course they have other acreage as well, but that's what we've done. So like I said, we've been around for a few years, and we've seen a number of things happen, which I will be talking out here in a minute, but thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. So as a bit of a review, I thought I'd put up a slide from our first presentation. This slide, I think, can you see that, John and John?
I can.
It shows the 50-year history of the total San Juan Basin production on a per day basis, the red being the MCS per day. And then this is the big Fruitland uptick right here, late 80s, early 90s. And then the green is the oil per day with the chart on the right. You can see at the height of it, we were over 4.5 BCF per day of gas right around the year 2000. So this slide really speaks to the cyclical nature of our business. Trends, technology is part of that too. So we'll talk about the three things here. First is going to be the downturn, dealing with demand destruction and these current matters. The second area we'll touch on is the regulatory, how things are going here in Northwest New Mexico. And then looking ahead, election thoughts, future oil and gas activity, and some of our sentiments for the winter and 2021 and beyond. So I'll get to the nitty gritty right off the bat. Either of you can answer this. How bad, deep is the current downturn for the San Juan Basin in your X number of years working in the San Juan? John Alexander, do you want to start with that?
Well, it's not good. We've gone through a number of cycles. Of course, we've seen this in each case. The thing that's pulled us out of the cyclic nature of the deal has been an increase in the price of a product. But that's been always the thing that's brought us back. And now with the double whammy, double black swan, all this other kind of other terminology that you see, it's difficult to see the thing coming back, especially the demand destruction from the COVID and the lack of activity. So it's about as bad as we've seen it. And again, we're still we're big gas people, and we have a lot of confidence that it's going to come back, but it's not going to come back to the $10 or $12. Tom Dugan still has one of our check statements that we got from Enterprise, who buys our gas. It was back in July of 2008 or something like that, when it was like $10 or $12, and he still he has that check stub cut out, a copy of it, and pasted in his private restroom wall, and it's still there, and Sean still left it. So in our opinion, it's going to be a tough road, and it'll be really difficult to see what's happening.
John, any thoughts of yours? John Thompson?
Yeah, well, I concur with John, and a side note, and it hasn't been good here for a long time. I actually was visiting with Mr. Dugan in 2018 at I think a function at the college before he passed away. And I asked him then, had he ever seen anything this bad? And it was before all of this happened. And he said in his lifetime, he had not. And I've thought about that a lot, thinking, wow, he's seen everything. And you know, since about 2008, it's been pretty rough sledding here in the San Juan Basin. And you know, I think 2016 is when the drilling rig count went to 0, which is essentially where we are again. I had never seen that in my, you know, I've been doing this since 1985 and specifically since about 1991. And I've never seen anything quite like this. And so the aftermath, or what I'm looking around seeing, you know, there's a few projects like gas has bumped up a little bit. You know, and for years I heard people say, well, it'll get better in the spring, or, you know, it'll get better this winter. And we've been living in this cycle of just, you know, pretty horrible gas prices for a long time. There was the boom, I guess, of the oil production that was great for this area. I think it threw a little bit of lifeline to the service companies, but now that's dried up for the time being. And if you look around, that's what really scares me, is our service companies have really taken a beating and have frankly left. You know, it's kind of heartbreaking on Main Street, you know, to see the Halliburton yard empty, the Dowwell yard's empty. There's just a lot of people that have left the area. And, you know, before this big crash, you know, they had other places to go. And sadly, our industry across the North America is just, it's in tough shape, and a lot of people are hurting right now. So that's what I'm thinking. Even if there is a bump in price, we've lost so many people, so many services, so much professional knowledge, that I'm really worried about, you know, any kind of resurgence and how painful that process may be. So.
Okay, so 0 rigs are currently drilling. John Alexander mentions price coming up. We'll get to that later in the presentation. Any ducts that are getting completed in the Mancos oil window? John Alexander, John Thompson, that you know about? Any things like that that are currently going on as far as infrastructure, things like that happening in San Juan Basin?
As I said, DJR is our partner, and they have some ongoing efforts because they don't have a rig running either at this time. And as everything else, it's the probably at the, I just noticed that oil this morning was like 42 plus, and it's been hovering around that point there. So probably, I don't know exactly how many drilled and uncompleted wells there are here, Mancos wells, but I'm sure there are some. And I would assume that they would return to complete those as quickly as possible. John is correct on the service companies part of this. We're finding a real issue with that. And so you're having to bring people in from out of town. Liberty has the only frac crew here. They've left their equipment here, but they don't have any people here. So I'm sure you will see some of the drilled and uncompleted wells complete, and probably relatively quickly here. The good price of oil appears to stabilize.
Okay, so we talked about some surprises that have come up. As bad as things are, there's very much to be grateful for. I think one of the things which I realized on I was listening to a really good podcast I'd encourage everyone to listen to. It's called Hot Take of the Day. Write that down, Hot Take of the Day. It's a Denver guy that has been in many basins across the country, David Ramsden Wood. But he had a guest on from Bakersfield, and the guy was saying, well, you know, one thing that I wished I hadn't done is tried to get so big so fast, because I have all this debt. And as I looked at my balance sheet, and I had always wanted to get larger myself, but never pulled the trigger with PE or with other companies. So the fact that I have I just have household debt, small mortgage debt, but no debt on the business or anything like that. So that just kind of resonated with me, just personally and with the company as well. Considering these challenges, John Alexander, John Thompson, are there any surprises about the current downturn that have resonated with you?
I think I, in general, was surprised at, as John referenced, the longevity of this. We don't have any debt either, and that was, again, that's come from, I think, Tom's basic philosophy. You're not going to get very big in some respect, but you also don't have any debt. So that was the thing for us. We went into this with zero debt and a little bit of money in the bank, and that's going to help us, carry through this thing. But as far as surprise, other than just the general nature of this thing, and you see a lot of bankruptcies, things like that, that people that are highly leveraged, and then you're seeing the consolidation, of course, of the private equity groups. If you're supporting a number of companies in a small area, then you don't really need to do that. You need to, get them all under one roof is kind of what I've seen happening. So it's kind of amazing what's happened with especially in a private equity, and the number of people that got, as you pointed out, too big, too fast, and you had to admire them for it initially, but they certainly got blindsided. Nobody saw this coming. I haven't seen anybody write, "Oh yeah, I saw this coming 3 years ago." I mean, you just didn't see that, and that's just pretty unusual because we're a pretty egocentric industry, and you'll always find somebody that says, "I told you so," but I haven't seen that this time. So I think that in itself probably gives you a clue about how unexpected this was.
All right, John Thompson, any thoughts on that for you and Epic?
Well, I guess on that note, Epic is in the same boat as far as no debt, and so I think that's extremely important in this time frame. And so you're right, Jerry. That is something to half glass full to be looking at, and we're just trying to hang in there. I guess for surprises, I've been surprised how busy I've been trying to break even, and the work involved. And the intensity that we have with here at our shop, with just trying to, that's we took the mantra that let's control the things that we can, and try, be aware of the things that we can't, obviously price and demand and all of that. So it's been a tremendous amount of work, and I'm very thankful to work with the group that I do, that's been able to so far weather. Like I said, we're just trying to keep our head above water and break even. And so it's been a lot of work, and I've been, like I said, surprised at the amount of effort that's taken with everything going on.
Okay, good. Well, and we were on the phone last night after work talking about a workover of one of our wells that needs a pump change. So that was going to lead me to the next subject on what we're talking about here. We've done some nominal workovers on wells, usually low cost, around $10,000 per well, to take advantage of rigs which are in the area, or we think might be a fair or maybe even less than fair rate of return. Well, part of me is a little bit optimistic about Novi March on the gas pricing. Three of 45 wells we operate are shut in. John Thompson, how does your company deal with these problem wells? Work over to not? What's the key criterion for that, which probably is cost? But what other criterion do you look at, John Thompson, if any, when you look at these wells, and percentage of wells of yours that are probably shut in for a while?
Well, I would argue in the second quarter of 2020, there were no economical wells in the San Juan Basin. Everybody was struggling, but we've looked at we've tried to take an approach where we look at a well by well and try to determine if the well on its own merits is cash flow positive or not, and if not, kind of what range is this a short term thing? Is this a long term? And there again, we can't control that side of the equation. But the other side, you know, we'll try to minimize costs. You know, we like I think a lot of people applied for at least Walsh did, the PPP loan, which then we tried to pass on to our clients in a reduced rate, you know, for the couple months that we had that. Just like I said, trying to make everybody whole, hoping that this was just a ditch off the road that everybody ran into. And then as things stabilize, we you know, we can adjust as needed. So that's something to that level, I guess, use the word surgical, on the expense side, where we really try to take a hard look at everything. And then on workovers, I guess optimistically, with the prices bumping up as they have, you know, we look at cash in the bank, and then we're trying to high grade, you know, which wells to go fix. And that's really all where we're at, is just fixing things, and doing what we can afford to do. We're you know, we don't have any big, you know, capital expense budgets of trying to, you know, actually grow at the moment. We're just, like I said, trying to maintain.
Okay, John Alexander, any thoughts on that with Dugan?
Yeah, we're a little bit different in that part of the aspect, because we have our own rigs, have our own pulling units, and so I have 170 employees, and a lot of those operate in the service section of our business. So we've had a reduction from people just leaving on their own. We've never fired anybody, haven't let anybody go, but we haven't replaced people that have done this. So we set a couple of general criteria that made sense to us. One was a production rate of 25 MCF a day or less. We just decided we would not pull, and we wouldn't pull them unless if a leaseholder. I mean, you know, there's a couple of things that we had to, obligation wells that we had to have. From our Navajo allotted wells, of course, you had to have production each month and things like that, which are to us issues. But we've had our own pulling unit, so we made that decision back a couple of months back when the price of oil was down as low as it was in April. We shut in most of our oil wells, and what we did in that case, because of the paraffin issues, it takes you got to be cautious about what you shut in. I mean, if you shut in a Fruitland coal well that's making a lot of water, well, you can produce the stupid thing for months before it ever dewaters again, and that depends on where it is. So all those things you have to consider. Our oil wells, we get out, we buy drip, and we just displace the hole before we shut them in with 60-degree condensate, so that prevents the paraffin issues. That's worked out really well for us. The drip's pretty inexpensive, and we have our own truck that can do that. So we have not done any workovers other than those wells that meet that general criterion, and to keep our crews available to us. And sometimes that doing your own service companies stuff, it's sometimes, but that seems like a really good idea. And then other mornings you wake up and you think, what was I thinking of? You know, I mean, you know, it's just kind of one of those things that happen. An editorial note. It's just that. The thing that we have been doing and going on is we've been plugging some wells. The plugging liabilities, you hear a lot about that, and so with as many wells as we have. And despite the fact it's relatively expensive, even our own, John referenced the lack of service companies, and we see that reflected in some of the individuals that work with us. They're good people, that they're trying hard. They haven't been around for a period of time, and like you had to experience Halliburton people and things like that. So we've been doing that because we think that's important, and we think that's going to be a big issue, both mechanically and you know, politically. So we've continued to do that. Other than that, we've just been kind of sitting still, and we did start turning part of our oil wells on a couple of weeks back when the price of oil seemed to be stabilized. So we've been doing that.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Well, we'll pivot to to an area you touched on a little bit in your share just then, John. The regulatory and state requirements in some of those areas. We'll talk about a little bit about the methane advisory group. I know you and I talked last week about how sometimes these orders on state regulations and matters come far, far, far from the wellhead. They come from Santa Fe, and the degree of difficulty in how they're given to us as producers is a lot more severe than, say, the Aztec office would do. And so I think the Aztec people are somewhat fearful of what's going on their side. We've plugged wells. We've been in conversations with the state and some of their people. And what we thought was so-and-so's attitude to working with us, it's changed. And so talk about other state regulatory matters that you would think of, John Thompson, and in this area that we can talk about just for a few moments.
Well, this is sort of a hot topic. So, I mean,
be careful what you say too.
Right. I as I mentioned earlier, I got hit in the head. So it's been really, I guess, back to the surprise component. I've been surprised that on a couple things on the regulatory front, that the NMOCD has totally changed how they've done business there again since I've been in the industry, with some of the policies that they're coming out with, and the enforcement issues that have been taking place that we've seen, have sort of been surprising to us at that, at a time where everybody's just trying to survive. We really were hit with an onslaught of and maybe that was part of the COVID thing that they were sending people in the field, but we were surprised at the level of, I guess, scrutiny that the well locations were receiving during this time. I mean, obviously environment, air quality, water quality, all those things are extremely important regardless of the situation, but we're not talking that kind of enforcement. We're talking well signs, painting, things that we had developed a work plan with the BLM, who kind of on the other side of the spectrum has completely gone away. They've sort of shut down their shop, and we've had some levels of frustration trying to get things through, right away approvals, pretty minor stuff. And so it's sort of like we're being stretched in opposite directions. And yeah, I think there's a lot of concern in the industry as we've talked, as we move more into a punitive situation where, it hasn't been clear on the fining. Before, historically the OCD always, through their notices of non-compliance gave you an opportunity to fix things. I think there's a lot of concern from the industry that I'm hearing, and from what we're seeing, is that I think those days are possibly gone, and that, regardless of the level of infraction or whether the seriousness of it is, you're going to receive a fine. Maybe not. I mean, I've never seen so much, clarity issues with the regulatory in quite some time. So it's very concerning. Like I said, on top of everything else that's going on.
So in that area, one of the new things that has gone on in the last 6-10 months has been the methane mitigation, which the state OCD and I think the environmental department have worked on. We've got, I know your brother has served on the MAP, the methane advisory panel. I know this was probably one of the most amazing group of 5, or I guess it was 8 industry producers which were on that panel from various companies from Southeast and Northwest. They were just, I know that what we're going to get out of that is, I don't know how beneficial that's going to be to our marginal wells in the San Juan or what. So long and short, John Alexander, can you speak about what might be the results? How might they be affected by the new rules? I know there's a holding pattern right now on delayed comments deadline because of the COVID, how did the San Juan Basin marginal wells work into the mix? Those wells under 60 MCF, but I mean, I think a marginal well is under 120 anymore these days with the price. Any thoughts, John Alexander?
Yes. I always had lots of thoughts because that seems to be a regular topic that we have around here. I'm really concerned about the methane rule for a couple of reasons. One, we know that it is our governor's signature legislation. She did that by executive order, and so her name is pretty muchly associated with that. And so we're concerned about what's going to come out of this, and especially how it's going to affect our operations. We operate a lot of really marginal wells, and the NMED rule, part of this, it has an exemption for low producing wells. The OCD rule does not. But the really confusing thing that, and I have one of our engineers, Kevin Smaka, is on working with part of these groups that were put together by the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association to form a united front, if you would, for information that's there. Is you have EPA and the Quad O deal, which we've dealt with for quite some period of time. Then you've got the EPA on some of our flowbacks from our foam frac wells having to account for the emissions there. Now you have an OCD rule, and now you have an NMED rule, all of which, a couple of different pieces of legislation, all of which kind of seem to run over each other a little bit. And which one are you going to believe? And that, so our biggest concern is we've got so much regulation that it's really difficult for us to follow. And while we haven't been fined for anything, and to my knowledge, my understanding, really only been a couple of companies in the state that have actually physically been fined with the new penalization that can go away. But like as John Thompson referenced, we've been inked for well signs and covert green instead of pinion green, and things like that, which to us just at this particular time seem completely inappropriate for for things that we're trying to do. We've had a number of below grade pits that we've had to clean out because you can't see the bottom. And that is what the rule is. And the inspectors are doing what they should be doing, but it just seems like that to us, it's really difficult to deal with when you've got other problems that you need to deal with too. And a lot of these things are just such little consequence that it's becoming an issue for us.
I remember that Mr. Dugan would say that stuff is chicken followed by another word. And anyways, yeah, there's many things, but I guess it's keeping us on our toes and keeping us, our reputation is very important in the state and in the region. And at this point, why don't we pivot to looking ahead of the curve, whatever that curve might be. We can discuss some election thoughts. Let me also mention to everybody, if there are any questions, please go to the question box and put any questions that you might have, and we will answer those at an appropriate point as we wrap up. So feel free to do that. And also on this methane panel, let me just back up just a bit. I think this is probably it could be one of the things which are one of our associations could even have a panel on over Zoom of talking about the methane rules and what's coming down. What I got from what we just talked about, John and Alexander and John Thompson, it's things are in a little bit of flux. We're just really unsure how it's all going to shake out. So looking ahead of the curve, election thoughts, future oil and gas activity, sentiments for this winter. Appears that the pandemic could push back whatever getting back to normal means. And We talked before we started a broadcast today that normals in many of our views is the only thing we see that's normal is the setting on the dryer. So we've seen demand falling for world oil and gas. We have the pending election coming up, and there are threats of the new Green Deal, threats of fracking ban, especially on federal lands. So we have a lot of enemies in the country that are specifically focusing on anti-oil and gas sentiments. John Thompson, what are your outlooks, views, thoughts about how you see this winter in 2021 coming up and beyond? Any sort of feel for natural gas pricing? I know oil's going to probably stick around 40, but natural gas seems to be a little bit more of a volatile wild card.
Well, with everything you just said, Jerry, that I just try to look to see, maybe guess what tomorrow's going to be like. I have something I saved in my desk. I think it's from 2008 or 9. Well, no, it'd be before, just a little bit before that. That said the price of natural gas, San Juan Basin, will never go below $4 again. And it was an article in, I don't know, the Journal of Petroleum Technology or something. But I think since I've been doing this, it's really anybody's guess. I mean, I listen to experts. I read stuff just like everybody else does. I really enjoyed your last speaker from the private equity, their outlook. We're not really seeing gas. That's what I thought was sad. We're excited that it got above $2 this week, and I thought, well, it's just back to being really bad, and we're happy about that. It's better than $1.05. So the election, I'm not going to touch that one. I mean, I think America, I'm worried about our country. And you're right, we have a lot of enemies. I guess to be hopeful, I think the younger generation, because where they get their data and where they, look and are learning, kind of like last year's IPNM, one of their speakers, the podcast guys, I thought was very, very interesting to me, that the younger generation is learning things maybe differently than how we've learned stuff. And the reality of the situation is that whether you like fossil fuels, you hate fossil fuels, you want to ban fracking, or we use, and our lifestyles are fundamentally dependent upon oil and natural gas. And regardless of policies, that's not going to change. And so the majority of the clothes we wear, the food we eat, everything around you was brought to you by America's capability of producing this energy. And I think that's a reality that's real and is going to be kind of a baseline. And so with that being said, we're hoping the prices will just be enough that, like I said, we can continue to do what we do, maybe grow a little bit, and hopefully there'll be a brighter future. But I do think, as you'd mentioned, with rolling blackouts in California, I mean, a lot of these policies are not working, and so that goes back to the reality of where I think we are with fossil fuels. So, I mean, with that being said, like I said, I think what we do is important and helps a lot of people, and it's good for the country. And so I'm just going to try to hang my hat on that.
Okay. Any thoughts, John Alexander, on, I've heard of companies that are getting out there and getting some federal permits going. I don't know how widespread it is. And one company I know on Hickory, Blackhawk, they were ready to drill some nacimientos, some shallow wells up there, but held off. We're looking at permitting wells and looking ahead at strategies like this on fee and federal. How do you think a potential Biden presidency would affect the permitting in the San Juan, John Alexander? And expand on those kind of thoughts.
Well, you're way above my pay grade with that question.
I don't know about that.
So, anyway, so as I've told everybody that I'm not sure about my crystal ball being cloudy, but I know that my pickup window's full of mud. I'm out of washer fluid. So it's a little hard to see where we're going at this. The Biden presidency is not going to be good for us. Again, it's just John said. If you're looking for sympathy, this is just not the business to be in. It's truly not. But yet we are critical from this standpoint that I'm not sure how many people realize that every product on every shelf in every store in Farmington, New Mexico came in here by diesel-powered truck. We don't have any way to get stuff here. That's just it. That's where it came from. And so we're a critical business. I guess my concern is this. As a bunch of people, when everybody headed to the Permian and Encana moved out of here, sold their interest to DJR, which worked out to be probably a pretty good deal for us, but to head down to the Permian, a lot of other people, like a bunch of individuals, and then all of a sudden now they're in the bind they're in with way too many people and way too much oil and gas. And so you've got to be back cautious about doing those things. And so the thing like the Green New Deal, understand a little bit about, so forth and so on. Dependence on fossil fuel, on renewables, primarily wind and solar, with the huge footprint they have, and the relatively small energy footprint that oil and gas has. We've got to be. I'm with John. I mean, we've got to. People have got to have us, and it's just not going away. Not in any short time. In a short time anyway. But it's going to be more difficult. It's going to make it really, really, really interesting to see what happens if some of these people should go ahead and say, well, we're going to ban fracturing, for instance, and the effect that that's going to have. So those things really concern me.
Okay. You talked about the Permian a bit, and I think one question someone sent in a couple of days ago, how can San Juan gas compete with so much associated gas coming out of the Permian and with the lower cost shales such as the Marcellus and the Haynesville? And I'll put a slide up to kind of refresh us from last week of Sam Rasher had this on from Concord Energy, and it shows the what it was like on the black lines in 2010, how the flow of gas went from the San Juan, and then how it compares to 2019 last year in the volumes, which this was Waha, as he explained, was just really more of a kind of a way station for gas, not a huge hub, which it has become today. So you can see just those sorts of differences. John, Thompson, or Alexander, any thoughts on how San Juan does compete with the Permian? I know we're seeing a little bit of associated gas drop off in the Permian, but any thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the topics earlier in your presentations, Jerry, Jason Sandel's part of a group that's looking at different avenues to get gas out of the basin, and I think that's I'm hoping that's the tip of the iceberg. I think the dry Mancus window is going to be a big deal for the basin, and I don't know when, but there's been enough evidence, wells drilled, that I think we can compete. I mean, I'm looking at it, excuse me, bigger, that we're competing with the Marcellus for being a low cost, and those are big volumes, and so I think there's infrastructure issues, but it'll have its day in the sun again, and I think for those guys that are positioned well in the dry gas window are have a bright future, but I do think goes back to some of the regulatory stuff where we're at a bit of a disadvantage right off the bat on things that you talked about, permitting and stuff like that when competing with the basin. And so that is important, that we do deal with our lawmakers and the policymakers as we move forward to try to maybe equalize some of that as this gets developed in the future.
Yeah, it's almost as if the rolling blackouts in California don't really matter Maybe we could propose that natural gas would be an alternative fuel for California, that we could fill in some of that demand that they're not getting, since they have to shut down they have to close down their customers. People are going to die from overheating, and people are not going to, that's not going to work for people, that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Okay, someone called in with an answer. Is either of you guys, is there any market to sell our marginal properties and get out of the gas business and retire? Somebody sent that in.
That might have been my question, actually. No. I think John hit on it earlier. You know, you've got, with us, we're always looking at our inventory and trying to, you know, continue to plug and abandon the wells that just aren't going to make it. There again, you know, a 25 MCF a day well doesn't sound like much unless gas does go to $4 or $6, and then you'd like to have 100 of those. So, you know, I guess kind of being with the Dugan mantra, we live in that world, and we're not afraid of it. And so we, you know, we like producing marginal wells, and think that's kind of our, you know, our bread and butter, and we'll continue to do so.
Okay. On another issue here too, I was going to share, we'll start to wrap up here, but I had a slide. I got this on Friday. This is, I heard about this guy on Hot Take of the Day. I heard him about a month ago, Art Berman, and he's a geologist, retired. He spends all of his time researching supply demand numbers. He's very smart guy, but he shows this supply demand deficit expected in August this year and how it deepens into January. Forecasted for the winter of 2021, gas supply demand is comparable to the 2016 level, which is right here. That resulted in $3.59 monthly average at the Henry Hub spot price. So, of course, this is a supply demand deficit. I don't know if demand is going to be coming back much these days, but I just thought that was an interesting slide to share, and somewhat optimistic for gas and for this part of the world. Any thoughts on that, John, Alexander, or Thompson? I know we talked about this before.
Of course, we're hoping that the price of gas will increase up to a point to where we can make it. And so you really need to be really around $2.50 or in that neighborhood somewhere, where you can actually operate marginal wells and do that. We've, in the past, Dugan has, because we had some money, we have used the lower prices to acquire properties, and we still do that. We acquired one here at the end of last year, a company called Juniper that we bought, and it mainly because of the individuals involved in that company, and the marginal profit that you made in that sort of thing. So we're always on the lookout for that sort of stuff, and I think that's important. And natural gas is still going to be important, and I would not be surprised to see some deficits in production this year, because of people are not in that huge hurry to get back and begin to produce again. Of course, if you're not producing your wells, you're making zero, or you can produce them and lose a bit of money, but at least you're still getting some cash into your pocket, which is important.
One final question here that someone mailed in here. What is the status of our water disposal in San Juan? Is this a big problem? And how much are you having to pay per barrel to haul off and dispose of produced water? I know in our situation, it's about think it rounds out to about $1.50 for trucking and about $1.50 for disposal, depending on where you go and how close you are. And it's usually around the Farmington Aztec area where some of our wells are. John Thompson, John Alexander, any thoughts on that question?
Well, there again, that's something that we're looking at on a well by well cases, and it really depends, like you just alluded to, where the well is. And trucking, the disposal is not as much in our view as the trucking can be, and that's those are the big things for us: is water disposal, chemicals, and compression, and combined or one of those can really kill economics of a well. So there again, just trying to get to the closest disposal well, utilize your own. We operate and own several disposal wells, so that's, and Dugan does as well. So that's, the hauling expense is probably the bigger one.
Okay. One of the things we're noticing is the rolling blackouts and how renewables just can't keep up. Recently in the San Juan, ICAV, a renewable facilities firm from Europe, bought out all of BP's San Juan Basin oil and gas assets. It closed on February 28th of this year. This is ICAV's first foray into fossil fuels. And so I think it's a very intriguing buy. It'll be interesting to hear their point of view on the renewable fossil fuel world. And so perhaps we can get them to join us on one of these broadcasts in the next couple months. We'll see if they can join us for that. I'll share a slide with you on the new entrance into the San Juan Basin. I got this from our friends at Marion Oil and Gas from last year's conference. But the ICAV position is the dark blue here on the screen, which shows much of the coal bed and potential Mancos up here in the La Plata County, Colorado area, and then much properties of the old Amoco, next BP, now ICAV property in the San Juan Basin. Nibu, we know, are humongous, monstrous wells. We know just how fabulous those are. And we just see the huge potential that the San Juan has. Along those lines, we know about the renewable efficiencies. They don't have any more tenfold gains anymore. Oil and gas are here to stay, especially natural gas for worldwide distribution, for renewable backups especially. So that's why I'm really intrigued by this ICAV purchase of BP. The long-term worldwide picture looks very promising for natural gas. Lower emissions, safe, reliable, and much of it is North American grown. So I wanted to highlight next month's presentation, which will be on the San Juan Basin Mancos. And we thought that it would be great to highlight the huge potential that we have. We're not saying if, but when. I like your comment, John, on that. That's a way to be looking at that. We'll look at a smattering of the Mancos gas window wells that have been drilled, and we can preview them next month. Are there any other questions? Any things that you'd like to wrap up with, John Thompson, John Alexander?
Well, I'd just like to thank you for doing this, Jerry. I think it's informative, and it's always good to look at things through a different lens and to listen to other people's perspective. And I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. Thanks, Jerry, for putting this together. We are very still encouraged by natural gas. That's what we do, and I think that it's going to have a continued presence here. I'm a little concerned about little Rocky Road here as people try to figure out exactly that renewables are going to have some issues, and that is probably going to cause some issues for us. But this was easy; everybody'd be doing it. So we're not looking for sympathy. We're not looking for it to be easy. but this is really interesting, and we're really encouraged by it. And so, we want to, I want to end this on a positive note because we're really engaged in this, and I think this is really going to be good for us, despite the fact it's going to be a little different, but that's not new to us.
Right. Well, I really thank you both for participating in our panel today. I think we had a good group of participants. This will be available recording if people want to share with their colleagues or other people in the industry. This will be available online. I'll send out some links to that. Both of you guys I've known for a very long time, and I'm very appreciative that, it's just like sitting around a table talking in one's office or one's, down at the restaurant about things. So I hope that our audience got that impression today, and that our group of producers, small and large, and that have been there for a long time, are very intrigued by the industry. And I too want to end on a positive note. That's why I put that Art Berman slide up there. So without much further ado, thank you guys for being part of our independent panel. And next month will be September 15th on the San Juan Mancos gas, huge potential. So with that, we'll end our presentation.